Oh, hello again.
Hi.
Hi.
Aw, how are you?
So I guess we'll just wait like a minute, because it's already
Yeah,
2.
sure.
Yeah. That painting behind you.
It's a painting that I did. Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, wow. I love it.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
actually at my studio. I feel really grateful
I didn't.
as the world is opening a little bit. So are some of the spaces that I frequent, specifically my studio space. So it's really
Wow.
nice to be here. It's nice
Yeah.
to go somewhere, like not just be at home, but to
Yeah.
go somewhere and feel like, yeah,
Yeah. Outside of the home and outside of the space that you frequent all the time.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I'm moving this week, so it's a little bit chaotic. So I'm grateful for this little sanctuary. So
Oh, where are you moving to?
not too far, just down the road, but nonetheless, like yeah, still in Toronto.
Good. Great. Well, I think I just saw Joanne come in here and Krista Santos, so maybe we'll get started. So guys, I just want to welcome you. I am so blessed to have Parul here today, talking about a whole bunch of things. We're going to be talking about emotions and vulnerability, and yeah, we're going to really just dive right in, get real gritty, get real, and you might see some tears from myself or Parul, you know. But yeah, so Parul, tell us a bit about you and some pieces of your story.
Sure. Okay. So well, here, this is like a relevant thing to share. So my name is pronounced Parl, like Carl with
Good.
a P.
Parl.
And what's really interesting is my whole life, growing up as like an Indian Canadian, um, my teachers called me Parul, and I never really had agency to introduce myself. And so, I remember when I was 18 and went to university, I started introducing myself as Parul, and I was like, wait a minute. I have full control. I have full agency to express my name as I would want it to be shared. And so, it was this like not a big moment, but this like very relevant moment for me to like kind of reclaim my name. And I feel like
Ah,
since that moment, I have been taking little pieces of me back and reclaiming different parts of myself. Um, and uh, and that's been like really part of my journey and like hashtag reclaiming everything, like just really. um, but
yeah.
yeah, a little bit about me. That's like a little piece of me.
Say it one more time, just so I can make sure that it's ingrained in my brain.
Yeah, so my name is Parl. It's
Parl.
yeah, and like to help people phonetically pronounce it, it's like Carl with a P. And what's really funny is I see people like being like, I can see them saying Carl in their head and then saying Parl. I see them doing that transaction in their mind. And so, um,
No, that's thank you, because you should have your name pronounced right. I mean, it's not fair to you at all. So
yeah.
thank you for calling me out for that.
Well, no, and you know what? I think it's interesting, especially like, just noticing that, it's never offensive, right? It's not like I'm trying to correct someone or like I'm just like sharing or educating or offering a way that feels good for me. And so you don't need to apologize. You just need to embrace. And I think that's like a pretty good analogy that kind of transcends not just like my name, but like all the pieces of our lives. So um, really hearing people versus apologizing, because sometimes when I apologize or someone apologizes, like you don't necessarily hear, you're just like, awkward moment, I'm so sorry. Anyways,
And
not
I
I'm
know,
not, I'm not
I will
saying
admit it. I will admit it.
that.
Oh gosh. Anyway, sorry. Go on. Continuing on with your story.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, like I mentioned, born and raised here in Toronto, and but grew up in a pretty traditional household, Indian household. So yeah, I think like I think what they call them is like third generation kids. A
Mm.
lot of these kids that are, including myself, that have experienced being one foot in the boat of tradition and family and culture, whatever that culture may be, and the other foot kind of being in the culture that you're brought up in. And so it's like nature versus nurture kind of idea. Um, I think as I've like grown over the years, especially over the last few years, it felt like some quantum leap growth there. I've really acknowledged how challenging that was to me understanding my values and what I value in the world and what my boundaries are. And, you know, having taken a lot of time, I've had some pretty big life moments that have happened pretty publicly that I can't quite, you know, hide from. You know, like me calling off my wedding, naming one of them, and just, you know, me shaving my head, another one. And it's just been these like big moments that uh, were so public that I couldn't even look away. You know, sometimes when something happens, you're like, I don't want to see it. I'm just going to leave it over there. Um, but when it's a big visible thing to others and yourself, it just causes a pause. And so I've been fortunate. I think what is it like? Every challenging situation is like a blessing in disguise, one could say. And I would say that I've had a few challenging situations that have really altered the course of my life um, in the most beautiful and wondrous ways because I gave them space to. Um, I would say that there's post traumatic growth, and we don't talk about that enough. We talk a lot about post traumatic stress,
Yeah.
like PTSD, and post traumatic growth is also so real. Like this exponential moment of learning and of self realization or self empowerment. Um, and even when I say empowerment, I kind of don't, I've disengaged from that terminology because to say that you've empowered yourself means that you didn't have power before. And,
Right.
and that's not true because we all have power. And, and it's really quite tremendous and important to acknowledge that power within yourself. So you're not reclaiming because you always had it, right? So.
Oh, hey, I have it on my arm here. You always had the power, my dear.
Oh, perfect. So there we go. This is why we're talking right now. And I see some of my beautiful friends from India here on this chat with
Oh,
us, and
hi, hi, hi.
and you know, while talking about my story, I'll share that I recently went to India. I've been to India several times. My grandparents live there. My parents are from there, from northern India, and so I've had the opportunity to go several times. But this last winter was the first time that I went as an adult, and fully. It was fully my decision. I was the catalyst and the provoker of that trip. And that trip was so important to me. Some of the humans that are on this live right now are people that I met while I was there.
Oh,
And that trip was tremendously important to my learning of what my culture and my ancestry is. Um, to be honest, I haven't been able to go to a yoga class in Toronto for like 2 or 3 years because I just like can't get over the white girls in Lululemons and the teacher that can't pronounce the word namaste. And it's namaste, you know, and it's like there's you know, it's just like it just doesn't feel like there's a true acknowledgement of the lineage of yoga and now there's like a and I love that people are doing yoga. I love yoga. I love meditation. These are all like beautiful practices that should be shared broadly. But it felt a little bit weird to never really see people that look like me in something that came from my culture in these
yeah.
spaces. So it's just like so that, you know, like that was one of the many little moments that kind of asked me to be like, hey, like, girl, do you know enough about your culture? And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I don't feel like I do. And that's because I was born outside of that environment. And so I went to India and really got a chance to see, like I said, nature versus nurture. I really got a chance to see how I became to be me. You know, like I'll give you like a really small example. I drink a lot of hot water and I always have a thermos with me and I always am like, it has to be like piping hot. And I like for the longest time, I was like, that's so weird. Why do I'm like, this is cold. Please go heat it up, sir. Like, you know, like, can you make my coffee extra hot at like any coffee shop? And I was just like, you know, I felt like kind of like a weird little alien person for always asking for that or wanting that. Went to India, everybody's like that. You know, as like a small example of like behavioral or like, you know, things like we have ancestral trauma, which I think people talk a lot about that. But, you know, what about the ancestral traits or like ideologies or like expressions, you know, that we don't
Yeah.
maybe reference as much because we seem to consider maybe more the negative side of these things. So India was like a very that experience for me was very difficult and very triggering and very beautiful. Like just, um, yeah, I learned a lot. Um, anyways, so that's a little bit about me. There's like many little pieces of a larger puzzle that is me.
Right.
Maybe I'll leave it there and
Yeah, no, I am like grateful that you shared that. So, in terms of the things that maybe triggered you on this trip, and what was going through your mind in terms of your growth and finding out, more about where you came from, and how are you now like adapting when you come back to Toronto? Because do you want to incorporate some of those things that you did over there, and how do you um, really embrace that?
Well, here's an honest fact. I oh hey Anubhav, oh my gosh, look at this like my fam from India here. I wanted to move to India. I wouldn't be here. I would be talking to you right now from somewhere in Asia if it hadn't been for COVID-19.
I think I actually, for you, like we met right before you were going.
Yeah, exactly. I had an airplane ticket booked and everything, and I was really ready to go. And what's interesting, so what took me to India was, and what was triggering in India was feeling like I was assimilating into a culture without understanding my own culture. I felt like I didn't have that opportunity. Um, but also, like, when I think about Indian culture while being here in North America, it's like, okay, like we got butter chicken and chai lattes, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
unless I'm going to like my parents' house. And so it's like very whitewashed version of my culture. And, you know, it was like, you know, I grew up and feeling like degrees of reverse racism. Like I didn't want to be around people that look like me because like, you know, people in my family or my community or culture or whatever were trying to assimilate. And, you know, all of that, you know, whitening creams, there's such a big thing in Asia, not just India. And, you know, all of that to me was just like, you know, after I shaved my head, I was like, I had an identity crisis a little bit. And I was like, okay, like, who am I? And like, where do I sit on this? Um, it really caused me to think about um, the colonization of India and those impacts on not just my family and the generation that was impacted, but also myself. And so I wanted to go to India to experience the potency of my culture. And what I found were traces, big pieces of, you know, colonization that still exists. This idea that the West is best, this idea that whiter or fairer is better. And it's so deeply ingrained. And what I found to be, it's upsetting. And then, you know, it comes out in a form of microaggressions. It comes out in reverse racism. It comes out in so many different ways that it's really like, you know, I had a friend that said this to me, and you know, this is going like really off over here, but like, um, you know, even like the porn industry is pretty white, right? And I don't know anything about that space in so much depth, but I was interested. I was like, wow, that's fascinating, right? Like, because then you think about Hollywood and, you know, so there's a lot of cues that are very westernized. And I'm, of course, westernized. Like, I'm, you know, born and raised here. Like, you know, you can hear me speak and I, you know, if you're blindfolded, you may not know that I was Indian, right? Unless I was like saying some things. But um, that was hard to see, like to go to like a yoga school and be like, oh, there's like white bodies on all these posters, guys. Like we're in India. Like what is why are we doing this? So, it was
Yeah.
really, yeah, it was like, you know, it was weird, but also so beautiful because when I would say, "Hey, I'm Parl," and I was traveling with another friend who was also Indian Canadian, and we'd introduce ourselves, and it's like, "I'm from Punjab," and like that's where my family's from, and they would get so excited. They're like, "Oh my God, you're one of us! This is so exciting!" And it was just like this genuine embrace that I really appreciated, and I felt very welcomed and. To be honest, it's still an unpacking, and as the things of the conversations and the challenges unfold in the world, thinking about um, the movements that are happening not just in Canada and North America, but the Black Lives Matter, but like there's similar movements happening in India, for example, in and around citizenship and religion. And so this isn't just a conversation of Black Lives Matter, it's a conversation about oppression. And the Black Lives Matter movement is so important because that community has been so oppressed.
Yes.
The trans community being so oppressed. Like, these people, especially in some of the wealthiest countries in the world, have been just tremendously oppressed. And, there's a difference between immigration and slavery. My family immigrated here, right? And versus, Black families, especially in the U.S., were brought in as slaves, and that's such a there's no comparison in that moment. And in India, a similar thing has happened, right? Like when India and Pakistan split, it was Muslims versus Hindus, and like that conversation was really really heated when I was in India in January, and it was really confusing. It was really upsetting, and I was like, you know, coming back to a culture that I was just starting to get to know. And so when I see and feel and sit with what's happening in this moment here with us in North America, um, it brings up a lot. It brings up a lot of thought, and the amount of feelings that I have towards this. Ask me, provoke two or three questions, and the primary question is, am I feeling this so much? Am I crying? Am I upset? Am I the potency of my um, anger or sadness? Is that equivalent to my this? Is that equivalent to how much I didn't know before? Like how much I didn't see, and now
Yeah.
I'm feeling it all at once.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's important to acknowledge because that's a reference to our school system. That's a reference to like how things have been shared in the past. And
Hmm.
um, anyways, they're not really have had any space unless you're seeking that information. That space doesn't exist in the mainstream to have
Yeah.
these conversations until now, which is so important.
So, so important.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. In terms of, and I've said this before on a live session with Joanne, who's here, as a, privileged white girl, in school, we were only taught certain things. Like some of the stuff I didn't even know had happened. I think we actually know a bit more than maybe the States, but so much that I didn't know and so much I have to learn. Like years and years of learning is going to be happening. Yeah, like it's so important doing this work. Well, hopefully more people are doing this work to learn about the backgrounds of people around you and yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, and I think like what's kind of a little bit troubling to me about this moment,
Mm,
it's learning is so important. Education is so important in this moment, but in general, period. Um, But part of education is asking questions, and
Yeah.
part of education is getting curious. And part
Mm,
of it is also getting things wrong and being lovingly corrected. Imagining a teacher that was, imagining any teacher that actually served you positively. That those are traits that they expressed. And I think the feeling that I get is that people aren't really being genuinely curious. And maybe that's because it's not a skill that we've really had to hone in our society, but being curious and going down rabbit holes and looking for things. And I'll say that I've been a culprit of that too at different points. And so genuinely being curious, but what scares me more is the silence, like feeling scared to ask questions, um, feeling scared to say something wrong. Um,
mm,
it's hard to know what someone's intention is on the interwebs here, but intention matters. But intention without action is empty, and so um, if you are if your intention is coming from a deep place and you are actively curious, and there should be a space for you to ask questions. And I think the confusion is, who do you ask questions to? How safe do I feel? Will I be reprimanded, or will I be able to like have a learning moment? And I think that space feels like where we are right now, and that space
mm.
is like where we're trying to navigate in this moment, which I think feels the most precarious. Because I get it, the people that are teachers might be tired because they've been teaching and preaching for a long time. And I can only imagine repeating your story over and over again, how frustrating that could feel. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, this is like, I'm just kind of sharing my candid thoughts and like free
Oh, and that's
expressions
totally fine.
with you here. But yeah,
And this is what I want these sessions to be, is realness and authenticity. Authenticity? Did I say that correctly? Okay,
authenticity. Yeah.
thank you. And being vulnerable, because this is how, we're going to learn, and we're going to ask questions, and we're going to hopefully insight, so we can, change the way that things are and how people treat, and maybe uh, create some respect for each other. So I appreciate you.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah. Uh, anyways, so in terms of your journey, was there a time that you felt any shame or judgment? And how did you deal with it? Because I know that a lot of people have difficulties going through this and overcoming it. So what are some of the things that you went through, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, I mean, hey, like who hasn't felt shame and judgment? Like either you're judging another person or judging yourself. And even when you're judging another person, that's just a reflection of you judging yourself, to be honest. Um, and Gosh, well, I went through many moments of shame, and what I realized, especially the two moments that I acknowledged of those like these kind of like big pivotal life moments for me. Um, but anytime I felt shame, I realized it was because I was trying to meet someone else's expectation,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And alongside the word shame is the word should. I
Mm,
feel shame because I should be blank. I feel shame because I should have long flowing hair, right? And then if you extend that sentence, it's like, why, right? I feel shame because I should have long flowing hair because I'm Indian. And so shame gets complicated because you quickly attach it to other things. It's that feeling below the feelings. So sometimes when you feel shame, what you in fact feel is anger. Sometimes when you feel shame, and anger could be really constructive. Sometimes when you feel shame, you avoid or you hide. There's so many offshoots to the word or the idea of shame, and so whenever, and what's the best worst part about shame is that it thrives and feeds on darkness. It feeds on you pulling back. It feeds on you hiding. It feeds on you running away. It feeds on you avoiding. It feeds on you making yourself small. And all you need to do is like put a little flashlight of light onto that shame, and then you'll feel it start to loosen and ease. And as soon as you have the courage, it takes so much courage. As soon as you have the courage to do that, and it's in the smallest way you possibly could to help yourself feel safe, that starts to build that muscle, that practice of courage to like, you know, push that shame over, get out of here, like, push that shame away. And so in my experience, I mentioned like, calling off my wedding and shaving my head were really public experiences. And I'll lean on them as like moments of feeling a lot of shame, a lot of judgment, and again, judgment to myself, and perhaps judgment from others, but more so from myself. I think it was worse because I was self-deprecating and self-loathing, and in this like stew of self-turmoil. And so, what I would say is that if you just whisper anything you're shameful about to one person and just start whispering it to others, your voice will start to grow louder and louder and louder. And then you'll actually not even recall how to be shameful about whatever it is that you might be experiencing. And maybe that's a vulnerable post online. Maybe that's a story that disappears in 24 hours. Like
Yeah,
there's so many little nudges that you could do. And at the end of the day, it's not for anyone else. It's for yourself, to express those things out loud. Or in my case, anytime I do share those things out loud on my Instagram, or in any form of media or conversation, even like this one, I'm sharing my story not because it still pains me, um, not because I need to acknowledge it anymore, but because stories and sharing out loud or how is my modality of being like, hey, I'm with you on this. This is
mm,
this is where I am, and this is where I've come from, and we're not that different. And like, here's a ladder, or here's some words, and like, this is how I came out of the space. And so I think the more that you manage to move through your shame, the more permission you give to others to do the same.
that beautiful, and
Yeah.
um, completely why I'm doing what I'm doing right now
Mm.
is because I want people to feel like they're not alone, and they are, they're not alone in how they feel or their shame. And being vulnerable is the only way that's going to, like you said, the only way that you're going to be able to release that shame or release that negativity is to be able to, let it out and have someone else hear you and feel seen and feel heard. And yeah, so that I think it's so important for human connection even. And I think we've kind of, bottled up for a very long time and kind of pushed things under the rug in all ways. And now I feel like people are starting to feel more comfortable expressing themselves. And it's I personally see it, there's little steps happening. There's little steps happening of people, sharing and growing and being vulnerable. And thanks to Brene Brown, she also is, driving that force. But vulnerability, I've had to do a lot of learning over the past couple of years of that. And I mean, I've always been an expressive person, but um, it really does help. It really helps you find out who you are.
Yeah, and
So,
I think out of all of the horrible things that the moment that we're in have given us, some of the beautiful things is vulnerability,
mm,
realization that we need to connect, understanding that we're not alone. It's like your actions are impacting my world. I think we've seen that pretty clearly, especially in um, the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yes.
It's like your inaction is affecting me. And so it's almost like your existence matters. Everyone's existence matters a lot, like a lot. And everyone's existence impacts another person. And it doesn't matter if it's one person because that's a ripple effect to who knows how many people. And then if we were to get spiritual about it, thinking about generational kind of passing on of these attitudes or these beliefs or these inactions.
Mm.
So, we have a chance to break a cycle right now. And it's going to take all of us to do it, right?
Yeah.
Or at least a strong majority. And so, what does that look like? And I don't know. But in my humble opinion, I would say it starts with being honest. Honest with yourself first, before you can
Mm.
ever really be honest with someone else.
Yes.
And like,
So, sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
no, no, go ahead. That's it. Yeah.
But just to go on that topic of being honest with yourself, if someone is really struggling, let's say they know that they're not living their truth and they're kind of living by all the standards and the shoulds and you know the rules that are put in place by society, what step, I'm sure there's a lot of them, but would be most beneficial for someone to find out who they are and what's authentic to them?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I think people make that, uh, they make that like such a glory moment. Like,
Mm,
it's like, I'm going to find my purpose, right? And it's like, it's like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to find my purpose. Here I come, world. And, right. But, and that is absolutely the action that needs to be taken. But if you
yeah.
think about it, action is like three layers, like external,
Yes.
right? Action, before actions comes, like, so in the order, it's like intentions, thoughts, actions,
Mm,
right? And so if you're taking action, how intentional were you about that action? And then where is that intention stemming from? I guess there's even a point before, which is your, how do I say this? Learned behaviors, internalized beliefs, and so what I would say for someone that's trying to find their purpose or trying to live a life that's truer to themselves is step one is acknowledging that this is not going to be a comfortable journey. And if
mm-hmm.
you would like a comfortable journey, ignorance is a bliss and enjoy it. Um, if you would like, and even in ignorance, there's friction and there's tension and there's pain and there's lashing out, right? But if you would actually like to live like a purposeful life and that purpose being aligned with who you are, there's a lot of hard work that needs to happen first. Um, and that work is like looking at yourself truly, looking at the really difficult, unbecoming parts of yourself, right? Um, and then also the beautiful parts, and both of those things are really hard to do, right?
Yeah.
Looking for beautiful parts. It's accepting that. Like, how good are you at receiving a compliment, right? Like, how I'm really bad at that because I'm like, oh, like compliment, thanks, it's not easy either, right? But so imagine trying to compliment yourself, and so are you able to receive and are you able to acknowledge the good in you? And are you able to stand there long enough to see the shitty bits? I don't know,
Mm,
right? And both of those things are tremendously hard and they require stamina and attention and time. And so what I would say if a person is like really just like trying to start this out and they're like trying to navigate this space, a tool, a modality that I use every day, to be honest, is free writing. Um, so if you're familiar with, I'm not sure, are you familiar with free writing? What free writing is?
Um, Go on. I probably
Okay, uh, I'll continue. Sure.
okay.
So,
What is free writing?
well, okay. So, okay. I guess this will like see where I start here. So, free writing is essentially writing. I use a good old pen and paper, because there's no editing, right? When you're typing, you have a chance to backspace too easily. We don't want any of that. So it is writing without stopping on a piece of paper. Like you don't stop. You literally, if your thoughts, you could be mid sentence and you're thinking of another thought and you are writing that other thought. We're not worried about grammar. We're not worried about punctuation. We're not worried about form. You are just writing like as it comes. And I remember like writing things. It's like, oh, it's a really nice day and something blah blah blah. I really want chips, and it's like it's like it's obscene. It's obscene, right?
Yeah.
It's not sensical, and that is the point. Because when you're thinking about many things at the same time, and so the premise of free writing, and the reason why you don't pick your pen off the paper and you do not stop is because what you're trying to do is bypass your conscious mind and go into your subconscious.
Mm,
And things will come out. For me, a lot of the things that I share have come out when I have been doing a free writing session for myself. And I am generally surprised. Like a lot of my poetry is free writing, a lot of my speech writing is free writing. And even this conversation right now, this is me free talking, right? Like I'm not necessarily filtering everything I say to you right now because I trust that for me before the session, I set an intention and I grounded and I knew I know where my heart is right now. And so I don't need to filter it if it's coming from my heart. And I know that I have many degrees of intellect that are also there. So I'm not, going to just kind of spew nonsense. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what free writing is. And if you Google that free writing, check it out online. You'll be able to find other little tips and tricks. But it's just as easy as setting a timer, 20 minutes maybe. If you maybe five, maybe you build your way up, and writing without editing, without thinking, and not stopping. That's it.
so how long did that take you to really master? Because I feel with me, if I start this tonight, because I need like a fresh piece of paper. I need like, if something is, I have literal whiteout that I use. And as a, I guess, perfectionist, like it's very hard for me to kind of just continuously write because again, like I want it to be subconsciously, I think, perfect. And like what I'm writing to make sense and that it's, meaning something.
Yeah, I would say that I'm still working on it. I'm
Mm.
still and the reason I say that is because every day is different, right? Like some days when I'm feeling really turbulent and really shitty, but a specific flavor of shitty, I can free write.
What
I
kind
can
of flavor is that?
you know I can free write and no problem. Like I can free write because I have so much. I'm like and I'm just like writing. But other days when I'm feeling another version of shitty, over here, I find it even hard to collect my thoughts. I find it hard to sit still. I actually find writing when I'm happy to be sometimes challenging, more challenging than writing when I'm sad. And so I would say that there's no such thing as doing free writing perfectly. If you're striving for perfection, you can strive to be unperfect, and that is perfect.
Ooh, hashtag that. Oh
um, yeah.
my gosh, amazing. So what does authenticity mean to you and like, where do you stand with that on your journey right now?
Yeah. So now I would say that it's really hard for me. Hmm. So, okay, well, authenticity, what it means to me is that you're being honest with yourself.
Mm,
You're being honest with yourself. Like, don't worry about anyone else, just you. So what I'm saying coming out of my mouth is something that I actually believe to be true, um, beyond all the learned behavior. Because sometimes what happens is when, in my experience, when I think something is true and I dig a little, and sometimes that digging takes years, I learned that that's not actually like that India example experience I shared before. I realized that that's not actually a behavior that is mine. It's a behavior that I learned. You know, assimilation isn't, the degrees of assimilation that I've experienced in my life that most of us have experienced. Um, those aren't necessarily who we are. That's how we have been taught to be. Right.
yes.
And so when I say being honest with yourself, I mean like kind of stripping past those layers and finding the honest truth of me, Parl, not the honest truth of like uh, me, Parl, brought up in a North American society and like all the things, all the labels that are attached to me, all the moments of identity that are attached to me. It's just who I am, Um, so that feels kind of abstract, and I guess I don't know another way to express it in this moment, but being authentic is feeling like you are aligned and honest with what you're doing, how you're sharing, and the intention of it. And so, um, to me, when I'm feeling like when I'm authentic, I'm not apologetic.
Mm,
Um, and I'm like direct, and that directness can be felt as discomfort to the person on the other side. Um, but it's not. It's nothing against them. It's nothing about them. It's just being like, hey, this is me, and this is how I'm gonna. This is how I want to be in this situation or in this moment or whatever it is. Um, so yeah, that's my definition of honesty. And I think you asked another question, and I don't recall what it is.
I don't remember what it is
Sorry.
now, but I just want to make a note on that, and it's inspiring to hear you say that because I am, um, and I've admitted this before, a people pleaser, and I'm apologizing all the time, and I think I've apologized to you before multiple times, and it's a hard road to unlearn the stuff and the behaviors that you've been taught, and I like myself, I'm really trying, and I want to get to a point where I'm not apologizing for what I do and what I say and what I stand for. I want to get to the point where I'm like, yeah, bitch, this is how I am. Like I'm still learning, and like I look up to you really because your strength and your self awareness, and your intention is incredible. So I just want to commend you on that because you are an inspiration, and um, I know that a lot of like women that Joanne, who's on here, she said she's been following you for a while, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that. But um, but yeah, you are doing some amazing things, and I just wanted to say I appreciate you, and I, I know you're going to do great things. So we're getting to the end, and we're going to talk still a little bit more, maybe take some questions. But this is kind of a loaded question, but what would be your advice for the world in this very moment?
Oof. Okay.
Ooh.
um, yeah. So, hmm. My advice in this moment, okay, so right now people are going through different versions of hard things,
Mm,
right? Maybe it's COVID related. Maybe someone in their family is not well. Maybe it's related to some of the movements that we're seeing across the world in different movements in different countries. Um, you know, maybe it's the conversations that we're having right now, right? Um, we are collectively going through turbulence, and that
yeah.
turbulence is different for everybody. And using this moment as a place and a time to reflect and to really introspect, be introspective on why this is so hard for you, what is so emotional, why are you triggered? Um, I feel so alone. I feel so lonely. Like I want a hug, and then like the hug part's real. Like it's like, can I
Oh,
hug myself and can I feel nourished by that? Why can't I? Right. And I think that there's a lot of things in this moment to truly reflect on.
mm,
And in this moment, if you are courageous and able to sit with those feelings, if you have the space to do so, um, it will it will serve you. Right now, hi Nita. Right now, it will really offer you an opportunity to dig deep because trauma or traumatic moments, and traumatic doesn't have to be like something really horrible. It could just be someone looking at you the wrong way and it made you feel bad, right? So acknowledging these moments that make you feel bad, that's a moment for post-traumatic growth.
mm,
And if you take that, it could very well start as post-traumatic stress, or it could start as stress and pain and just sheer anger or emotion in that state. But you have the opportunity to shift it.
yes.
And I say that, and I'm cautious of saying that, right? Because there are a lot of things we also cannot control. But what we are talking about here, when I say you have a place to shift that, what I'm referencing is that you have a place to shift yourself into deeper alignment with who you are, your actual truth. And let me tell you, when you find your truth, it would be really, really, really hard to not be loud about it and to not proclaim it with love and with kindness and with gentleness, because anyone that has gone through this process of trying to align themselves with themselves, they know how hard it is. They know how many tears they've gone through. They know how much support they needed through this process. And you can only approach this with loving kindness when you are truly in this place. And it's so hard not to love everybody and everything around you, understanding that we're all kind of on an individual journey that is fucking hard.
Yeah.
It is fucking hard.
Amen.
And, there's no shaming of anyone in where their journey is, but it is it is hard. And to say that I'm privileged and you're not, so I shouldn't feel this way, is not true. And to say that you're privileged and I'm not and I feel this way, it's like, you know what, like if we sit with ourselves and we all get real honest with ourselves,
Yes.
we'll actually be able to hold each other and move to different places and spaces where we can all be together in the journey. Because it doesn't to my journey is that the more space I hold for myself is the more space I can hold for other people.
Mm.
And so getting deep with me means I can get deep with you.
Okay, you know how I said I wasn't gonna cry? Got tears in my eyes because that was honestly, I hope that lots of people are going to hear that message because it is so true. And, having kindness and compassion and getting, real with yourself is, hopefully, like you said, like what brings us and allows us to hold each
If I could share just like another
yeah,
note here, which is history matters a lot. And, again, I'll reference the beginning of our conversation when I talked about my experience in India and like me trying to align or acknowledge or see my ancestors in a more clear way. What that, what my life experiences have taught me is that history matters a lot. And understanding your history, my history, and then our collective history. Again, compassion and nourishment of oneself can extend beyond you in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to without understanding the history behind it, which is so important in general, but even more pointed in the moment that we're in right now.
beautiful. Just that this conversation truly been amazing, and I feel so grateful that you are here sharing this, your story and your thoughts. And I just again appreciate you. I know I've said that a million times but it's always a pleasure to speak to you.
Oh.
Um, your words. So I just want to open this up to any questions for anyone. I know we have a couple people on here. So just a couple seconds of that. Usually there isn't. So,
Well, I think what's interesting, I think like people are trying to figure out how to digest everything in the world right now. So, yeah.
it's
Well, I would offer you and then whomever else that might be watching this, you're like really welcome to. I mean, sure, you can follow me, less important, but more important is you're welcome to reach out to me if you have a question um, that I feel like I can answer or at least acknowledge in some form or another. You're like really welcome to do that.
oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we have like probably a couple minutes left before they start kicking us off. But thank you everyone for joining us, and um, thank you for. Now I'm like Parl.
Yeah.
Did I say it correctly?
Perfect. This is perfect.
Beautiful. Oh my. Um, yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm sure that some people got some great insight and some life lessons that they hopefully will take in and digest and hold within themselves. And yeah, that's all for today, everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank
And
you. This is lovely.
oh, no problem. We'll see everyone on Thursday. And if you guys want to check out the soul sessions, we have uh, lots of great speakers, including this beautiful face right here. And I hope to see you guys all there. Okay, bye everyone. Bye.